Greetings, my magnificent ones. Sue Paulson here, your magnificence mentor. We're at the Heaven on Earth series, and today we're going to do part 2 of signs and symptoms of inner peace. Last week, we talked about the first 3 signs and symptoms of inner peace. You can pick up that recording on YouTube if you missed it. Today, there are 9 altogether now this is from a handout that I got many years ago, and I confess that it wasn't attributed to anybody. So I always give credit whenever I can to those who put these pieces together that I consider to be valuable information. But I guess the only credit I can give to is anonymous because I don't know who it was. Anyway, bless whoever it was for contributing this piece, because it gives us something to chew on, something to think about, and perhaps ways of moving forward to your version of heaven on earth. So let's dive in. The first sign of inner peace that I want to talk about today goes like this. It's a loss of interest in conflict, in judging others, and interpreting the actions of others. So let's work with conflict for a minute. You know the emotions that surface when you're embroiled in some kind of conflict, whether it's a conflict with siblings or other loved ones, whether it's a conflict at work, an inner conflict, some turmoil going on inside yourself. I don't know about you, but I tend to fight with myself an awful lot. It seems less risky than fighting with someone else, but I think the results can be often the same, that it hurts. So when we look at conflict in general terms, it's not I think conflict can be productive in some ways if it's resolved, but the conflict itself never feels very good when we're deep in the midst of it. So I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to avoid conflict whenever I can. Now, so what are some reasons for conflict? How do we get embroiled in a conflict with someone else, let's say? Well, one of the reasons could be that we're judging other people. We're judging who they are, or we're judging their actions. And often it's an interpretation of their actions. They do something that seems quite, it could be an action that's pretty innocuous, pretty ordinary in the whole scheme of things. But if we interpret it as bad or wrong, or we take it personally, then of course we have a problem, because we're judging their actions. We're judging them. Oh, they're a bad person because they're speeding. And you don't know, maybe they got an emergency phone call from a family member and they need to get somewhere in a hurry. Is it against the law to speed? Well, yes. But there are times when I know I've done it because it was an emergency, and I did everything I could to get there as quickly as possible. So, but of course, if that particular individual cuts you off in traffic, and there's this tendency to send out a wave of judgment on that, well, it disrupts our inner peace when we do that, when we immediately jump to something's wrong with them, or I'm upset because they didn't follow the rules, or they did something that caused me distress. Then immediately there's this conflict, and it shakes up our equilibrium. It causes us stress and turmoil inside our bodies. And of course, I know I've been fond of telling 5 people immediately, oh, you'll never guess what happened, and I'm all in a state about that, until I have time to kind of cool down. And usually after about the third time I'm talking about this, I'm saying, really, how important is that in the whole scheme of things? Maybe they had a very good reason that I don't know about to do what they did. Have I ever done anything like that? Yeah, probably. So then I do my best to cut them some slack. Why do I do that? Is it for them? No, it's for me. It's for me to come down, to get off that high ledge of high stress and say, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's get back to a state of peace. How can you come to a state of peace about that? So certainly you know that you're working towards more and more inner peace and experiencing more and more inner peace when you, more often than not, suspend judgment. You refuse to interpret somebody else's actions. You're more likely to say, well, I don't know why they did it that way or why they did what they did. If it's really important to me, and if it's any of my business, I guess I could ask them. So there's always that option to say, well, help me understand why you did that. Now, not the tone that I know I've used with my child when he was, why did you do that? It's not that. It's seeking to understand. And of course, the second that we start to understand, we invoke a level of compassion that wasn't there before. Well, of course, if we're battling with ourselves, the same thing holds true. Well, Sue, why did you do what you just did? And then I can beat up on myself, which I learned to do really young, and it didn't get me very far. But if I stopped and thought about it, analyzed it a little bit, often at the root of it is some level of fear about something. And oh, okay, I didn't know I was still fearful about that. Well, it can be a learning thing. It can be a growth thing. It can be giving compassion to myself where I say, oh, I see why I did that. Wow. Actually, I don't want to do that again. So I'll do my best to be a little more alert to that. If I get myself in that kind of a situation, I'll do what I can to stop that behavior because it wasn't productive or helpful or whatever the case may be, or maybe it hurt someone else. So it's to come back to that level of, oh, now I understand. I can take a breath. I can let that go. And it's just that, like the little balloon, the helium balloons that go up into the sky. Well, it's as if you just filled it with all of that compassion and then just up it went. Then you can feel more peace about that. So that's one of the areas. So when you have a loss of interest in that, when you just don't want to go there. Yeah, I could get into a wrangle about this or that, but I'm choosing not to, because it is a choice. It is a choice. Now, sometimes we have that instant reaction and, oh, we just want to go after them so badly. But I've recognized that as I gain in years and gain in a little wisdom here and there, I realize, no, that's not important to me anymore. It's not important. Somebody once said, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Well, I choose happy. It isn't that necessary for me to be right. And maybe I don't actually know if I'm right or not. And I feel that my perspective is right, but it could be wrong. It could be totally off base in this situation. And so I give myself and everybody else the benefit of the doubt and say, well, I don't know, and let it go. So that's the first one. Number two is a tendency to act. Oh, first of all, a tendency to think and act spontaneously instead of acting or thinking because of fears based on past experiences. So there's no question. Oh, itchy nose. There's no question that in my early days, speaking out or speaking up tended to have negative consequences. So I grew to be somewhat fearful of contributing, either because I thought I was going to be ridiculed, or maybe somebody was going to punish me in some way for what I said. So it became a thinking through, like, oh, this is in front of me. Do I really want to do this? Because in previous times, this happened. So, and the same thing can happen if we're in a business, as an example, where we've had business failures. Well, then we get presented with a new opportunity, and there's this, oh no, I can't do that. You know, I went bankrupt, or I lost that business, or something bad happened. So we base our future on what happened in the past, when in fact, if we learned what there was to learn from that particular set of circumstances, then the way forward could be extremely positive. So I think the challenge with this number 2, the tendency to think and act spontaneously, is that for some of us who tend to be more impulsive by nature, which is me, then if I can move past the fear, then that's easy for me. That, yeah, I'll do that, sure. And sometimes I've just forgotten about that bad experience. And so, and if I've had enough good things happen in the interim, then I'm more likely to just jump in and say, yeah, okay, let's move forward with that. That sounds like fun. Now, though, for those of you for whom spontaneity is a challenge, maybe the best you're going to come up with is something I call planned spontaneity, where you think it through and realize that maybe your initial sense of a course of action is based on this old stuff that no longer applies, and it would be better to plan how to do this in the future, and dive in and say, okay, yeah, okay, I thought about it, and let's go for it, rather than immediately turning away from it because there were these fears and you had a bad past experience. So that's the interesting thing I find about thinking and acting spontaneously, where someone phones up and says, hey, do you want to go here, there, or somewhere else? And you go, oh, I don't know. Well, gee, last time I did something like that, it didn't turn out that good. And well, it kind of disrupts your equilibrium, doesn't it? Because then you're pasteurizing things. You know, you're going back into the past and reliving how bad that was and so on. When in fact, if you just thought in the moment, that sounds like fun, let's do it. Because so many of these things that happen often happened 5, 10, 20 years ago, and maybe even longer, and have no relevance in your day-to-day stuff. I think of how many times we get spooked as kids. Well, that can carry forward with us if we allow it to settle in and take root in us. And all of a sudden we've got this big branch when it was a tiny twig to start with. And it no longer applies, but we allow it to run our lives and rule our lives and make it hard for us. So, and of course it sabotages our inner peace for sure. So that's number 2, the tendency to think and act spontaneously instead of that fear of past experiences. Now, number 3 is the unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment. There's other ways of talking about this. Sometimes it can be it's been talked about as presence, where you're right here, right now, focused on what's right in front of you. So you're present to the moment. You're present to. So when I went for a walk this morning, for example, I was very present to the colors of the leaves and the fact that one leaf was kind of a silvery gray on the front side, and the back side was a lighter color, more silvery than the front. And in the moment, I'm wondering, I wonder if I could mix my paints and duplicate that color. I wonder how close I could come. I wonder what it would take. So I was engaged in what was going on right there in that moment, and looking at the ducks paddling on the pond very serenely. The surface of the water was very still because there wasn't even really a breeze, so you could see the reflection in the water of the bulrushes and the growing vegetation at the edge of the pond. So it was particularly beautiful, and I'm reveling in each step I took and aware of what's going on around me, and just being in that moment. Well, when we're present like that, when we can enjoy, which is be in joy of each moment, that contributes significantly to our inner peace. All is right with the world. It's easier to revel in that, I guess, and then allow those moments to build on one another. I think presence or conscious connection in the moment is a practice. It's not something that I knew instinctively to do, although I think we do as kids. As kids, we instinctively enjoy every moment. We have this ability to, I watch my granddaughters, and they just go from one thing to the next to the next. They enjoy it for however many minutes they're absorbed in what they're doing. And then they look around and, okay, what's next? And then they pick something else, and then they're absorbed in that. I don't think that they're too concerned about the things that I'm concerned about, like, okay, it's 4 o'clock. I need to figure out what to have for dinner. And so I'm not living in the moment. I'm thinking ahead to what to cook them for dinner. Or I'm thinking about bedtime and, oh, how easy is it going to be to get them to bed? You know how kids don't want to go to bed, especially in the summertime. Well, it's a challenge when they come to Nana's house, because I have a different environment and different sleeping arrangements, and things aren't that simple. At least it doesn't seem simple to me. It does seem simple to them. They just, well, I'm going to stay up and I want to play until I'm tired, and then I'll go to sleep. Which is not always convenient for Nana, who really needs a little peace and quiet here and there. So I'm learning from them, or maybe I'm relearning what I knew as a kid and what I experienced as a kid. I enjoy each moment I have with them because they're particularly precious to me, obviously. And I catch the wave of this idea of acting spontaneously and just being there in the moment, doing what we're doing, whether it's making a fort or creating something with Play-Doh, or going to the rock snake to see who's painted what kind of rocks, and so on. So every time I pay attention to my attention and say, where am I? Am I here in this present moment? And am I enjoying where I am? Or is my mind wandering off to something else or somebody else or somewhere else? And I need to be doing that instead. So we used to teach when I taught study skills many years ago, the idea of being where you are. And if you aren't here, then go where your mind is. If your mind is over there, well, go where your mind is and put the two together, because you'll probably have real difficulty doing what you're not focused on because your focus is over there. So it's about pulling ourselves back and saying, okay, where am I right now? And am I enjoying what I'm doing in this moment? So those three things I want you to focus on this week. Do a little track to see how you're doing. You know you can do this because you're magnificent enough. So just to recap, we have a loss of interest. This is number one, a loss of interest in conflict, in judging others, and interpreting their actions. We're not as interested in that. Where are you on the level of 1 to 10? Are you still at an 8 or a 9, or are you moving more in that yeah, my interest is still pretty high, or your loss of interest is, yeah, my loss of interest is to the point now where maybe only focus on it at a level 3 anymore. So that's the first one. Number two, the tendency to think and act spontaneously rather than on fears based on past experience. And then number three, the unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment. So go enjoy each moment, my dear friends. And if you want more, you're enjoying the Heaven on Earth series, or you're curious about my previous Tea with Sue series, you can find me on YouTube under my name, Sue Paulson. You also can download my free app, The Magnificence Mentor, on either Google Play or the Apple Store. If you sign up as a member, there's all kinds of content available for you. That's free as well. Videos, articles, and so on, just to help you discover more and more of your magnificent self, unlock all of that, and then move forward. And if you are a growing fish in a growing pond with a desire to connect with other growing fish, I invite you to check out the Magnificence Lab. So it's magnificencelab.org, where you can read about this community that Chris Angel and I are creating to support one another, to walk each other home in the idea of changing our world for the better. And how do we do that on an individual basis, not alone anymore, but with support, with the support of a community of souls who have similar desires and similar interests. Until next time. So stay tuned for part three. Part three of Signs of Inner Peace is next week. Bye for now.